I'm on the verge of tears. That is one of the most disgusting things I have heard in a long time.
The church, which is supposedly so pro-life, can't get its thumb out of its butt to help. When your focus is on unborn kids, but you don't give a shit when they're dying, when they're alive, that's a problem, church.
Your righteous indignation is smarter than Jesus, is smarter than the God that you say you believe in. You don't believe in Jesus. You don't believe in God. You believe in your own insecurity that is driving your desire for power and control. It's all about us, and it's time to bow down. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bow Down. Dennis, as always, so very lovely to see you and be here this morning, and I'm excited to dive into conversation.
Me too. It's been a while
somewhere.
for our listeners. We actually have had, I think, the longest break in recording since we started this.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long, like 10 days or something, but it feels like forever. So it is so lovely
Yeah.
to be here. As always, you look radiant today. You look
Thank you.
absolutely gorgeous. So I know all of our listeners can appreciate that. We good to have some eye candy on this show because clearly I'm not filling that role. So love to be here. Full disclosure to folks, and I don't know if this will make it on the air, but we're kind of scatting a little bit today, sort of bebopping and scatting. We don't have a ton of we'll see where we go, so we'll see how this works out.
Yeah.
A little bit of improv, a little bit of just what's on our hearts, but we'll get back to regularly planned out things as well, but sometimes it's fun to just riff. So
It is. It absolutely is. And actually, now that you say that, one thing that I was like, oh, I was going to mention this to Dennis. They're coming out with The Devil Wears Prada 2, and the teaser for the teaser came out. So listeners, I feel safe saying, like, get excited. We're probably going to release a reaction video to that. And
without a doubt. Yeah, probably
yeah,
the week after it comes out. That's something I'll see in the theaters for sure.
totally.
I don't go to the theaters much, but that's for Devil Wears Prada 2, I will. I think I read the book, the sequel of the book. I don't know if the movie's based on the sequel or not, the book sequel or not. I didn't like the book sequel as well as the original, but it wasn't awful. I didn't mind it. But it didn't quite. The book itself is, and it was 15 years ago I read it or something as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Get hyped.
Yeah. 100%.
Cannot wait, yeah.
I saw the teaser on Anne Hathaway's Instagram, and I was like, bow down episode.
Yo, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of cool stuff. So I think so for today, I think our goal is we have a few topics to talk about and see where we go with. There's been some really interesting things just in the world, I mean, of course, the Epstein files were just voted to be released, which was, be curious to see where that goes.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff in our world. Another thing we've been bouncing around was there's been a creator on TikTok who's been doing recording her calling various churches and religious organizations, asking for help with her infant who doesn't have food and needs formula. And the results have been kind of unsurprising in many ways, but also saddening in some ways. So I think we wanted to highlight a few of those things just to talk about it without punching up or down or piling on or anything else, but just how it's affected us. And certainly, so what I've seen has affected me, and definitely have thoughts, and so we may talk about that. And we'll see where else we go.
Yeah, let's start there. I have this article up from the Shreveport Times that came across your feed that you sent to me, and the backstory for listeners who may not be familiar, there's a woman who has gone viral posting this TikTok series, and her name is Nicolene Monroe, and essentially she's been calling churches and saying she has a baby who is going to be starving, which there's certainly some underlying messages just within that in and of itself, with the government shutdown that's recently happened, SNAP benefits being rolled back for the month of November, and how difficult that transition has been for people. And so I think that's kind of like subtext here. But she has been calling around asking churches that she has run out of formula, and some of them have said yes, but a lot of churches are refusing to help. And it's interesting too to see the response to these videos. In this article that you sent, the headline is actually Louisiana pastor says woman has spirit of a witch after she called seeking baby formula, which anyone who's listened to our show before knows that we're like, hell yeah, she has the spirit of the witch, and see that as definitely a positive when we see that. But well, I guess I don't want to assume your opinion there, but I definitely take witch as positive, but certainly that's not what the pastor meant here. But it's been fascinating to see other religious people's reactions to this too, that it is, a purposeful trying to undermine the church, where when I first saw it, I really saw a woman who was in need. And where should you go when you're in need? I think it's actually makes a lot of logical sense to choose to go to a church when you're in need. That is kind of supposed to be why we have these community organizations. But Dennis, what were your first reactions when you saw this article? Had you heard about the TikTok series before? And what are your first thoughts and feelings, and why did it strike you?
Yeah, it's a complicated. So I had heard about the. I'm not on TikTok,
Hmm.
right? So yeah. Anyway, I may change that. I think I need to start getting on TikTok. Not watching it, but at least doing things. Um, but yeah, so I had heard about a woman doing this, and I thought, oh, what an interesting idea. Uh, and my first thought was, I don't know the context. I probably saw it on Reddit, would be my guess in terms of where it came across my attention. And it had to, and I think she had at the time she had, maybe she's done more, but she had called 40 churches and other, not just Christian churches, Catholic church,
Right.
not Catholic is Christian, I would say, but Catholic churches, but also some mosques, some temples. So it wasn't just a Jesus thing or Christianity thing. It was calling religious organizations. And she said, 4 out of 40, I guess, had were able to help or gave a response, which was 10%, which to me wasn't surprising. It was just a sad number. Like, but I get it. Like, churches are strapped too, to be fair. And I think it can be a little bit it's tough out there for and it's churches often these are small independent churches. I mean, I knew some of some folks I knew growing up, family I knew growing up who ran a church. Not they worked other jobs as well and were pastors of the church. So for a lot, for some churches it is a labor of love, and it's a calling. And I think it can be so easy to shit on these churches for this, and so I I I don't I don't want to pile up on churches who may be strapped for resources themselves. And so I don't necessarily have an issue with not being able to help. And so the 90% that couldn't help, I mean, again, there a lot of churches are making, just like households are making it week to week. I mean, month to month, it's, you know, this is running a church. I don't think in many cases is a get rich quick scheme. For they're
Yeah.
for most, I mean, I think you can absolutely view it that way, particularly if you go into the prosperity gospel kind of where I've been in my life. But uh, I think you can go into it to deliberately fleece people. But I also think that 90% of the actors in this space probably are not doing that. Would be my guess, and maybe 80%. I don't know, but uh, so I say that because a lot of these churches just don't have the resources, and honestly, they need to take care of they have folks in their own church who do come faithfully every week. And Jesus did say, in the or supposedly said to uh the Phoenician woman, right? The the bread is for the children. And then, of course, the Phoenician woman, says, "Yeah, but the dogs under the table even get to eat of the children's crumbs." And to which, of course, Jesus is like, "Ah, zing, you're." Which I have problems with that whole issue, that whole thing as well. Let's not go there. That'd be an interesting section to talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I have thoughts everywhere. But again, so it is fair, I think, as a church to say, hey, we're struggling to support the needs of our own community, the folks who come here week in and week out. We've got folks who are hungry. We're trying to provide for them. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough to give to somebody else. Get that. And I mean, it's sad that we're at that place in
Right.
this country, but I get that, and that makes perfect sense to me. Uh, but where I do draw the line and where I struggle and why I wanted to bring it forward here, was this response? And there's another one I want to bring forward as well that in
Yeah,
some senses I
please.
find even more heinous, maybe,
Mm.
certainly equally as heinous. But this doubling down, I mean, like if this so this article that we're talking about, like the pastor got upset because he basically got called out. Like he wasn't able to help. And which sucks. And I'd like to think that this guy, this pastor has love in his heart and would like to help but can't. But instead of just saying that, like, hey, we wish we could help, you know, and just being honest about it, like we have to, we're struggling to support our own attendees, the folks who call this church home, and we would love to help. We would love to help everybody. We wish we could. We don't have the resources for that. But instead to come out and use this idea, oh, this is, again, it goes back to the Jezebel spirit,
I was
right?
just about
Like,
to say that.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's this whole, like, it's not, you're the wrong one for doing this. So rather than addressing the issue here, which is people are hungry, children are starving, and the church, which is supposedly so pro-life, can't get its thumb out of its butt to help. That's, and I think that's not fair to the church in all ways, but the church has caused this problem themselves, because when your focus is on unborn kids but you don't give a shit when they're dying, when they're alive, that's a problem, church.
Yeah.
So rather than looking at that and saying, hey, we no, it's just double down on the nonsense. And so in this case, it's, oh well, it's I saw this meme. It was like, medieval Europe, who do we blame? And there was and on there, witches was one of
Whoa.
them, homosexuals was another, Jews was another, and few immigrants. I mean, it's basically a boring, banal playbook. Like seriously, guys, like
Yeah.
midlife crisis 101. Like you're just so be interesting, be unique. Um, but yeah, I guess that's so. Saying all of that, I kind of laughed, but at the same time, it exposes how these folks feel. Like,
Yeah.
and it exposes their heart. This pastor, you know, to me, his heart is not with people. It's about
Right.
controlling women. It's
Well, and I
about
think
controlling anyone who disagrees with with what he did. No, so I don't. I'm going to stop there because I've talked a bunch. So I'll let you
no,
talk.
no. I just wanted to add to what you're saying, because I agree. For these, there are a lot of churches that run as businesses, and it is for profit, and that to me is inherently distasteful, sits wrong, rubs me the wrong way. But there are a lot of really small community churches that do a lot of good in their communities, that are exactly like you said, trying to help everyone in their community, and just really may not be able to help in this way. I would still be a little curious as to, like, how might we go about then inviting this woman into the community, right? To support her in other ways that we can support her energetically, introduce her to the mommy group at the church, or the um a Sunday school class that she might be a good fit for, right? Like, I still think there is this question of, okay, even if maybe financial support isn't what you're in a place to do, there should be some motivation to still open your arms, especially as a church. But couching that, I think also my other thing that I just want to add is, how many churches were strapped for cash that said no? You know what I mean? Because I agree with you about that. But then there's also this, like, okay, how much are you really not questioning, like, doing for your community? Because, of course, churches are communities at the end of the day. But I would just want to investigate more and think, like, is there really, 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 like, all of these churches that said no, are they all in that place where they did not have that extra $15 because it was all going towards their community? If so, again, like, great, how can we invite her into community in other ways? But I would be shocked if that was all of these churches. So I think it
Yeah,
just
so
bears further research. But again, I think it just speaks to the nuance of what you're trying to discuss here, that it is just like such a spectrum. And I think, especially as two ex-evangelicals and people who have deconstructed and talked about our deconstruction, it's important that we're not approaching these issues with blinders on, like, well, fuck the church, right? It's like, no, we're trying to have nuance here and understand that good is being done. But also, critique should also be held. So I'll throw it back over to you, though, for some of your other thoughts, because I just agree with that. And I think we always try and have nuanced approach there. But it is hard. And I understand also why people have a gut fuck the church reaction. I get it. I still do, and then have to like wind myself back and be like, okay, let's look into this a little bit more.
yeah, it's complicated, right? These
It
parts
is.
that
It is.
it's so beautiful, really, even to have this conversation, because in the course of it, different parts of us will come out, because this is a in some senses a dangerous conversation for me, in
Right.
one sense, because I know that there are parts of me, or energetic forms, that have there's a lot of energy in them. And so I have to be very careful what I say. And I mean, and, and so what I frame it in the way I did, because I do have some really harsh things to say, but I also want, so, but you said something to me that just, it was just like glowing letters, and I have to repeat it and push on it a little bit, because I think it's so powerful, and it really encapsulates everything I feel. And that is we are, the responses that we've seen to me show me who is a church and genuinely believes in the authority and the lordship of Jesus Christ as their savior and who they want to follow, versus who it's Jesus Incorporated. And
Yeah.
you can see the difference between the two. And I want to highlight, and I forget the pastor's name. But I want to. I believe he was a pastor in Appalachia or something. Who, I don't remember his name, but we got to highlight him.
Yeah,
But
I'll
he
write
was
that down.
basically like, hey, what can I do? What's the name? I'm a great grandfather. What's the name of this formula? But I'm going to figure this out for you, because you need to have form. And it was this, that to me, and the good news is I think I read, like, they've gotten like $100,000 in like donations because of his response, and that's what needs to freaking happen. Like
Right.
this, I don't. Again, this is somebody who I don't believe Jesus ever existed. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest. I mean, people like Jesus existed, maybe even somebody named Jesus existed, but the Jesus Christ of the gospel is a figment of imagination. He does not exist in any real form. Did not walk the earth. I will die on that hill. And some people would say, okay, well, you're going to meet him. No, I'm not, because he doesn't exist. I mean, I may, because he exists as energy, but I'm not going to meet him. He's not going to be mad at me. Any of those things. Uh, and in fact, he'd be real pissed, I think, if he saw what 90% of his church stood for anyway,
Yeah. Oh
at
yeah.
least as far as I understand it. So, but this man, basically is like, I'm gonna figure it out. Give me your number, honey. Like, let me figure, uh, in I assume colloquial, like, I'm a great grandfather, but I want to make sure you have your form. That to me is the Christian spirit. That is the spirit of Christ.
Well, and also notice the to whom much is given, much is expected, but also when you give abundantly, you receive abundantly, right? It's also these other metaphysical and manifestation principles that we've talked about in the past that is, when you want to receive and take care of your community, the best way to do that is to start by giving. Is start with gratitude and generosity, and immediately donations flow in, right? And he wasn't doing it for $100,000 in donations. He was
No,
doing
that's
it
the
out of
key.
exactly.
He was doing, yeah, and you've hit upon such a key principle that I try to teach, or I just try to I even try to embody this, incarnate this every
Yes.
single moment with every single person. And I fail because I'm human, but uh the more I do it, the better I get at it, and the less I fail at it, and like everything else. Um but it is that, um I don't know, it's that principle of the harder if you try to create an action, you're not gonna create it. So, if he was trying to get donations, he would have never been able to do it. The cause it's not cause and effect, it's effect creates the cause, essentially.
Yeah.
This guy's heart was such that he wanted to help, and it caused people that effect, but the effect was is he can help people, and he
Yeah.
wasn't trying to do anything, and that's why we find out who, the goats and the sheep, they separate themselves. We know who the
Mhm.
goats are, and we know who the sheeps are. In terms of, and this guy who the Louisiana pastor who has the spirit of the witch, goat, not in greatest of all time, but as in, I never knew thee.
Yeah.
Depart from me. I don't know who you are. Uh, and yeah, I mean that's that. But I just want to highlight. So we are seeing the impact of the corporification of Jesus Incorporated, right here. Um, and it's interesting to notice who didn't fall for the Jesus Incorporated, who isn't Jesus Incorporated. Um, and but yeah, so but again, I think to see how it's trying to tear down this woman, right? Who all that this the only thing that any of the people who received these calls knew was there was a baby crying in the background, which was, sound effects. The content creator, to my knowledge, does not have a baby, but
Right.
you hear a baby crying in the background and an ask for formula. Now, she didn't ask for anything for herself. She didn't ask, I need food. I need to, no, it was my baby's hungry and I need to feed my baby, which I cannot imagine base, like a more base level plea than
Right.
that. Like, I cannot imagine a more genuine, authentic, real plea to Christians, like especially, but I think humanity in general, but to Christianity especially, because one of their big things is oh look, Jesus said, "Come the little children." Everybody else back then wanted to like either fuck kids or kill kids, but Christians, well, look how great we are with them. You guys are full of shit. I'm just telling you, like listen to what you say because you're full of crap. Um, but so yeah, so to really see who really practices what they preach is beautiful, but of course the churches, the companies, I'm sorry, the corporations who don't like the what like got exposed, you can see their response as well, and none of them
Mhm.
are like, wow, we really missed the mark, because that's all it would take, right? Like, we
Yeah.
need to reevaluate, how or just like what we said, like, we would love to help, but we can't, or why doesn't every church have at least a list of resources? So, I mean,
Right.
when I was an intern, like, we couldn't help everybody who came in because, when I was an intern in counseling, I mean, yeah, we could give counseling, but from a resource, there's things that came up that we couldn't help. But we had resource, we would say, I can't, we don't have baby formula, I really wish we did, but here's 3 or 4 places that I would recommend you call, like, this food pantry often has it. Here's things you can do.
Right.
That's that, rather than, "No, we can't help you." Like, and again, you can respond any way you want, but don't double down. So, I mean, what did you take away from the article? I'm curious, as particularly as a woman, as somebody who theoretically could be in that situation. Like, it is not, you could be, I mean, you could have a child, you could be in a situation where and you're not, because your situation is different, but this could be you super easily. And so, what
Yeah.
came up for you? I wanna know more, like, what feelings came up?
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned a little bit ago, but also like you said right at the beginning of this episode, just with so much of what's going on, especially right now in our current world and society, it just felt like such an encapsulation of all of it, right? That there is this like deep, deep um isolation and fear-based thinking that so many people are thinking about, and it kind of broke my heart that this is where we are. And It did bring up these thoughts about, like, the Epstein files and the treatment of young women, especially, and children, because this is a baby. And it also brought up the male loneliness epidemic that has been talked about a lot online because of how we are treating this young woman, right? And this idea that, um what if she's a single mom and we don't know, and and there's just certain layers here that were so baked in. And then for that to I want to read this quote. And I say, we in the middle of feeding people, how you gone do your little dirty deed. And it's just the spirit of a witch. It's a witch. And my Bible say he do not allow that thing to live. So you have to watch when you foolin' with God. And I would just say to the pastor, like, I agree. You better watch when you are fooling with God. And exactly like you said earlier, like, I think Jesus would be really shocked and appalled at some of this behavior. And I think in many ways, Jesus is the archetype of the witch. He used poultices and mixtures with mud and spit to heal blind people. He created potions to work these spells that Christians like to call miracles. He used phrases that are magical words that can cast demons out of people. And I think often we like to dress these things up as wicked because it's not in the framework that you enjoy seeing it. But Jesus never said anything about a witch, my guy, and actually was a magic worker himself. And to act as though someone who is clearly trying to make a point about something is evil is different. And I think oftentimes the archetype of the witch serves to point out the discordance in society. Like when we look at the archetype of the witch, it is absolutely divine feminine, but it is also healing medicine people. And it is also someone who lives alone, off grid, in the woods, on their own. Don't go to that creepy house. We don't know what goes on there. And that's an energy that we need. And I think we're seeing a revival in that right now because we are really coming to a reckoning as a society of needing to reach equilibrium in some of this energy. And I think if you look at someone who has pointed out a wrongdoing in you and you immediately jump to pointing fingers, I just, it makes me go back to all the lessons I learned in Sunday school growing up. When you point a finger at someone else, there's 3 more pointing back at you. Um, it could be a test from the devil, right? But even if it was, like, you failed and you're mad that you failed. So there's just a lot here. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's clear. Yeah, and I want to quote something else too, which was like like I teach these men over here, folk want to apologize. I don't apologize to the devil. Sometimes Christians get so weak you forgot we're supposed to rebuke evil. So but first of all, notice I teach these men over here. I just want to point that out. Just it's the men who need to learn this lesson, and again, apologies. Like you're not supposed never make apologies. Never make again. What is this teaching? He teaches men not to apologize. That's awesome. That's
What happened
that's
to turn your cheek and forgive your enemy
right.
37,
And
33
and
times? Or yeah.
yeah, 7 times. How many times shall I forgive my neighbor? 70 times 7,
Yes,
uh,
yes.
was what Jesus said when Peter, I believe it was, asked that. But then what I love is and then he basically goes on to say, Johnson then says the living faith has fed thousands of people. The pastor also says the staff gives out money. He lends his own credit card to women with children who had nowhere to live. Yeah, that I don't know. I read that as I got a black friend. Like, I can't be
Yeah.
racist. I have a black
Oh,
friend.
yeah. What a beautiful analogy.
I mean, that's all I read there, you know? Like, I mean, again, it's just so classic. And so it just but again, it just this just reveals the heart of this and I don't believe that the heart of everyone at this church is like this, by the way. That's the thing, like, but the heart of this pastor, you know, is an error. It's just it does not lie. It is not Christian in any way, shape, or form. So stop saying it's Christian. Like that's all. That's all I want. Like this attitude. Again, not being able to help is okay. Like I mean, I'd like for you to be able to help. And to your point, Reese, I think, are you really can you really not help, or are you choosing to not help? And again, I'm not the arbiter of that. I'm not the
Right.
judge of that. Um, you know, even if the church was, if the funds were mismanaged, and that's why they didn't have it, is that they want to do it, but they're bumbling. Again, not everybody's perfect, not every organization is perfect. Maybe I give them too much credit, but the fact is when you respond like this, it just proves why Christianity is a complete fucking failure in this country.
Yeah.
Uh, it is an absolute fucking failure, and that's a shame.
Yeah. One thing that you just said that I think is powerful, but I want to dig into it because I think there's something here is one, that Christianity is a failure in this country, but then also earlier you said, but this is not Christianity, right? Stop calling it Christianity. And I think that that's something that I come to a lot when I'm thinking about this is like, when I was still Christian and identified with that title, I very much had my own definition of what that meant to me and my own relationship with the figure archetype energy of Jesus, and that it was not the cookie cutter Christianity that people kind of passed down. And to me, there are a lot of people that are trying to fight for, like, well, Christianity is love, and this is not love, so this is not Christianity. But then at the same time, has this become Christianity? Like, at what point do concepts become the way we practice them and the way we think about them? The same way words change their definition over time because of how we colloquially use them. Is this Christianity now? In this other form of like love and forgive your neighbor and like truly behaving like Jesus Christianity isn't really Christianity anymore. I don't know, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that because I agree with you that it's like, well, this isn't Christianity, but also it is the epitome of Christianity, especially in the United States. So what is Christianity now?
I I don't know anymore. Like
Yeah.
I think there's a movement, and I'm curious. I think there's a movement back to more orthodoxy in some senses. Because what modern, I mean, to me, what Christianity is in at least from my perspective that I see is it's modern church is a concert and a TED talk
Yeah.
is all it really
Yeah.
is. Like I mean that's and again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with
Yeah,
either
love
of those
concerts, love
2
TED Talks.
things, but that's really what modern, certainly evangelical megachurch Christianity is. It's 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 a TED Talk. There's no depth to it. There's no I mean, it's practically AI. I mean, to me, like being a pastor now, feel at least like a preaching pastor feels like it would be the easiest job in the world because I swear to God, I could come up with 10 sermons from ChatGTP that would blow away most, you know, just so like it feels now like being a pastor is kind of the easiest job in the world for this type of no, I actually think being a pastor is a true pastor is a deep real calling, and so but in terms of what a pastor is in many evangelical churches now, I think it's that job is a lot easier than it ever was before. Um and and so yeah, I think a return to orthodoxy would be interesting. I do find it interesting that I think of the churches or of the organizations that help, at least one, if not two, were Catholic organizations, which Again, not to defend or decry or the Catholic Church. I do think though there is something beautiful about the ritual where a
Yeah.
lot of the I mean the mass today is probably, and I'm not Catholic, though I did have first communion for full disclosure. I think a lot of the rites are very, very ancient. And
Mhm.
I, as somebody who has reverence for sort of the ancient rites, I can appreciate that. So if I were to, want to go to a church or I would definitely consider orthodoxy if I was going to do something like that would be where I would lean, I think, nowadays. Certainly not the TED Talk sort of thing. Uh and again, I think the yeah, I think the church is unrecognizable, certainly in America. And what I think what frustrates me is for so long I was part of that. And you know, 30 years ago me might well have jumped right along the band. Now, I'd like to think I would never write something as awful as, or make these kind of accusations. I don't think I would because that was never in my heart anyway. But I definitely would have been aligned with, largely this energy. I'm glad I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
of all the things in the world, I'm glad I'm not. uh, and I think it yeah, it just saddens me that something that I was once a part of could fall so far apart and so far away from what it could be, I guess. And maybe
Right.
I'm looking at it with uh maybe I've got blinders on. I don't know. Maybe it never was this and
Yeah. No, but I relate to what you're saying because it's like there absolutely was a point in my life, and even now it's like there's certain principles in any sacred text and any sort of ascended master or prophet or these really beautiful people that walk amongst us, like you said, whether or not Jesus is actually a real man, the energy exists. And for me, I love studying that role and the stories of that. And, we have deep dived into the actual textual analysis of the Bible because there is something deeply profound in that text that is still worth like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. One of my favorite podcasters, actually, Alex O'Connor, has taken to saying don't throw the baby out with the holy water, and I think that's really funny. But it's like in this sense, like don't throw the baby of forgiveness and treat others the way they want to be treated, and some of these really beautiful, like, quantum and metaphysical stories that we have been given, sacred stories, out with the holy water that is this pastor saying that this woman has the energy of the witch. And it is hard because there was a period of time where I really felt so in alignment with my relationship with Christianity and this same reverence. And I choose not to call myself a Christian anymore because it's like, is it the one true religion? Is it the one true God? Not to me. And also the cultural aspects here, I vehemently disagree with. But I think the same way, everyone can learn from the Buddha. Everyone can learn from Kuan Yin. Everyone can learn from these ascended masters that are Mother Teresa, Joan of Arc, right? Like there's so many um, powerful, powerful figures that are also associated with religious movements, and their texts and their writings are sacred in this way that we can still learn from and not have to align with that, the cultural practice that exists around the religion. And there's still something beautiful to the community and ritual that can arise through religious practice. And so there's just a lot of dissonance with all of these different things. And actually, one thing that occurred to me when you were talking with and maybe that's what it is now. Maybe it was never that. Maybe it was just my experience with it and almost, at least for me, like trying to justify the way that this all made sense in my head that actually worked with my worldview. Richard Dawkins has, I don't know how recent this is. I want to say recently, but I think it's actually been within the last few years, who is a famous atheist and researcher of the word is escaping me, but like extremely science-based things. Yeah, the Oxford biologist and author of The God Delusion. Um, but last week, Richard Dawkins, one of the so-called four horsemen of the new atheist movement and a long-time implacable foe of Christianity, said, "I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. We in the UK are a Christian country in that sense. If I had to choose between Christianity and Islam, I'd choose Christianity every single time. It seems to me to be a fundamentally decent religion in a way that Islam is not." So, okay, that goes a little bit over. I hadn't read that full quote before I read it, which we could get into Islamophobia in the West, but
Yeah.
but I'm like,
My
that is a
made-up's
whole
better than
other
your
topic.
my make-believe's more right than your make-believe, sir.
Right.
And it's a hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah, but literally one of the four horsemen of the new atheist movement is now like, yeah, I'm a cultural Christian. Like, there's something to that is just like, in the 90s, there was this huge mass, like, new atheist movement that was like, we're gonna tear down religion, and now one of the key leaders of that is like, but we're all pretty much Christian if you think about it, even though I don't believe in the like metaphysics of it and the science of it. I'm singing Christmas carols, so I'm a Christian. And what do you make of that?
That's interesting. I'm glad you brought that. I'm trying to. So I get. I agree. On my first blush is to say, okay, I agree in the sense of that, at least in America and I suspect the UK as well. Like Christmas is sort of secular in so many
Yeah.
ways as we know, and it does pervade everything. Like you know
Yes.
there and so from that perspective, yeah. I mean, and how do you? I mean, you can say, oh, I'm not going to sing a Christmas carol, right? But you're still putting energy into it, like whether So you're damned if you do or damned if you don't, in the sense of to say, oh, I am. I mean, Christianity is a Christianity is a pendulum, and it's one of the many pendulums in the world, like politics, like this, but Christianity is a huge pendulum, and you can't not play. Like you're
Yeah.
like it or not, the pendulum is swinging, and to pretend you're not influenced by the pendulum is silly, because you are. So in that sense, I get what he's saying there. I don't know that I agree with him in terms of, it seems like fundamentally a good religion or whatever, like, or I don't know that I agree with that. I also guess I question in some senses the idea of the good with the bad. Like, in a sense, like, I'm sure Mein Kampf has some good tidbits in it as well, but I don't go around reading Hitler.
Right.
Um, uh, and so I would argue, does treating people as chattel and property and condoning that, and in fact condoning it all the way through the New Testament as well, like, at that point, is there anything in you that's worth? I mean, I'm not gonna. I could have the greatest meal, but if I'm not gonna eat a big cake that has, that I pour a bunch of feces into, or like, a little bit of shit. Oh well, this
It's
this
just a
this is
little
great,
bit of
except for this.
shit.
I'm just gonna put this little tiny bit of like sewage in it. You still good? Like, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that anymore. No, I guess you can. And again, this goes to the whole idea of the univocality and the of the Bible, and the fact that it's a single voice, univocal, right? It's not, and so I don't think you can. I think you have to be careful to say, oh well, if you're going to try to take the book as a whole, you know, I don't. I think you can't. Now, I think you can say, hey, this isn't a single uniform text. This is a collection of different things. Some of it's basically an anthology. Like,
Right.
not every you don't have to listen to everything in the anthology. Like, you don't have to like it. It's an anthology. Some you're gonna like, some take what you and I can agree with that. The problem is though, you can't have it both ways. This can't be the uncompromising written word of God. Uh, and then you can discard pieces. That's be fucking consistent. That's all. And so, I mean, I guess in some senses, these folks who have the espouse these horrible views are being consistent in in the sense of they're saying, no, I believe every word of this. So I can have on some level respect for at least they're consistent in I would argue you can be consistent in what you believe. But if you follow what the Bible actually says, then you're a shitty human being, in my opinion. So uh take it that way. Like, you're not somebody I want to know if you believe that this book is an instruction manual and I need to follow all of the instructions. Like, I don't think you and I at that point have I think our realities are so far from each other that we're not even living in the same planet as far as I'm concerned in terms of
Yeah.
so no, again, I can if you're able to say, hey, I think that this has wisdom in it in the same way that other mystical texts have wisdom, and I'm going to take the good and I'm going to spit out the I'm going to eat the hay and spit out the sticks. Uh, I'm more okay with that.
Yeah.
Um, but then the other thing that came to my mind though is again, if we're talking about these, again, I've said I don't think Jesus exists, right? I don't think that he was a literal human being. That he's an amalgamation, a whatever. I don't know. There's some, there's always some truth. There's that whatever. Well, by that same logic, then though, the God that these churches worship does exist. And
Right.
I mean, so there is a God out there who believes this God that these women are witches. Like, that's the thing, and that's difficult to wrestle with. I mean, in the
Yeah.
sense of, like, if I want to believe what I want to believe, but let's just call that. You might as well you're worshiping a God that exists, but it is not who you think it is. That's all. Like, your God
Yeah.
exists. She's just shitty. Or I mean, again, I don't even know that that's fair. Like, it serves a purpose. Like, that the God that these churches worship exists, but just admit it. This is not a Christian God. This is not a God that you would actually really want. I think, or maybe you would. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump is the perfect espousement of a lot of these Christians' God, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't really see a contradiction anymore because the God they worship is basically like Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump's an avatar of this God that they worship.
Yeah.
But stop attaching Jesus and everything else to it, because it's it's not true. That's all. Like, just
Yeah.
admit it. Call a spade a spade. I want to believe this because it supports my misogynistic, it supports my agenda, it supports my fear of homosexuals or anything that isn't me because I'm so closed-minded. Probably haven't left my zip code that, I mean, traveling the world does a whole lot to open up your horizons. Like, but
Yeah.
I would wager that this pastor, aside from maybe a pastor's conference in Baton Rouge, probably hasn't left Louisiana. And that's a generalization. And see, that's a part of me coming out. That's an unlovely thing to say. Uh, but odds are it could very well be true, because you can't be open to other experiences and to other people and be a Christian. At least not this fundamentalist Christian, because you're not
Yeah.
allowed to think anything that could. And here's the thing: like, I have such energy towards it, and in some senses anger and contempt, because I was there. I was one. You're never so upset. I mean, you're never so there's no one who's quite as righteous as a former smoker or a former anything
Right.
in
Right.
some very real, whether it's a a former plus-sized individual, whether it's a former uh, addict of any sort. Like, many of them are quite insufferable, and hopefully I'm not insufferable about this, because I also have the ability to see both sides, and I think a lot of people are are struggling out there, and so this is what they grew up with. This is what everyone around. This is what is acceptable. This is easy. It's easy
It
to
is.
profess to be a Christian. Like,
And I
there's no barrier for entry anymore.
right. And I think it's so interesting because I agree with you in this quote that it's like, yeah, in a lot of ways we all are kind of subjected to some Christian practice because of that, right? Like there really is no barrier and it is so intrinsic in daily life. But is that Christianity anymore? Like I love singing "Oh Holy Night," but to me, it's like it represents so many other things now. When we get to Christmas time, it's about so much more, and it's interesting to me because so much of the cultural pieces of Christianity, I think, are the ones that I take such um, issue with. Right, like to say that in Donald Trump, we're really seeing kind of an avatar of what this like Old Testament and New Testament, but like the father, like Sky Daddy with a beard staff kind of God acts like, represented in our current president, is like, okay, we can't really separate our lives from Christianity and the culture of Christianity. And yet, I think there is still, I was going to say a seed, a mustard seed perhaps, or like a piece or eh, I don't know, cuz I'm like I don't want to call it the core of Christianity because I don't think that that's true, but I think there is like a slice of Christianity that is still separate, that I still feel does embody this like love energy. And it seems really weird to me that the cultural aspects are the ones that you are choosing to connect with, not the piece that is about universal love energy. It's like the one that feels like all of the downfall of what's happening all around us right now is the cultural aspect that you are choosing to identify with, not these other pieces. But also with the kind of slice thing that I'm talking about, I think that extends into some culture as well. With what you're saying, some of these churches did absolutely, like the pastor in Appalachia, that it was like, okay, we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna get you some baby formula, right? Like that is a cultural piece of this that is really beautiful. But the I guess what I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between and would like to hear your thoughts on is like how I don't think you can fully separate the culture from the spiritual aspect, from the numinous aspect, and yet it seems like there's these two halves that are slightly different. And for me, when I drill down into what I find in like the red text in the Bible, which for those of you who may not be familiar, for our listeners, those are all the words that Jesus actually says, is usually printed in red in the Bible. So what you find in the red text versus what you find in the entirety of the Bible, just as an example, because even then, not everything in the red text is perfect. And this like cultural aspect that is reflective of this Appalachian pastor versus this cultural aspect of this Louisiana pastor and the religion that is basing itself on a sacred text. It's actually instructing you how to perform slavery. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of just talking in circles right now, but thoughts.
No, I don't think I think you're wrestling with fundamental questions like of uh wanting goodness in the world. I mean, in some
Yeah.
senses, and um i- i- on its face, right? You have this ethos, it seems, right? This Christian ethos, this idealism of, you know, love thy neighbor, help the poor. I mean, the Beatitudes, right? And
Yeah.
and and I mean, people talk about the Beatitudes all the time, but who lives the Beatitudes? Like, very few people do. Like, it's like a classic is a book that's seen and never read. Like, so few Christians have actually read their Bible. And honestly, there's the joke of, I stopped being a Christian because I read the Bible,
Right.
and that's actually kind of true. Uh, and or Another one that I love, and I think that this pastor is a perfect example of that. Like the 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 best argument against Christianity is just listening to followers of Jesus for the most part. Like to me, like reading this guy, like why would I want to be a part of this? Like who are you bringing in exactly? Like who who is going to read this and be like, shit, that's the church I got to go to. They got it right. Like, that's a loving place. Like, and
Right.
again, forget about the spiritual authority and this, that, and the other thing, and the Jezebel spirit, the spirit of the witch, and you know what? I want the spirit of the witch. I want to be independent. I want to like take control. I want to think that I have more power in this. That I don't need somebody to sanctify me and bless me and forgive me and redeem me. Like, I don't know. Like, and that's not
Yeah.
arrogance. I don't think I'm so great at all. I just don't think I need redemption. Like,
Well,
that's
and
all.
I'm a big piece of me too is like if we were made in the image of God and we were made imperfectly, well, what's your conclusion there? That God is imperfect or that we are perfect? Like you can't
You
have
gotta pick one or
both.
the other.
Right.
Like you
And
can't
I
have it both
think
ways. And
yeah.
and if we, again, and this idea of even parts, right? Like I've talked about that, and we've talked about it before. Like, well, we have parts. Well, God has parts too. I mean,
Yeah.
like if we are in fact, um, you know, multimodal, we're multiplicative, where there's a multiplicity of us.
Yeah.
Like, why? I mean, why wouldn't God have multiple views? Like
Yeah.
if we don't want to be put into a box of I am this or I am, here's my identity. Like, well, why are we trying to do that with God? Maybe I don't know. Like, if
Yeah.
God is all things, well, then he's the shittiness too, or she, they. God doesn't have a gender anyway, so gender is such a silly argument, frankly.
Right. Right.
I think. Yeah, I don't know, but it's again, like I wish people could just back down when, and stop
Yeah.
uh stop purporting to be Christian because you're not. Like you're not in any way, shape, or form. So stop.
Yeah. And
Like,
I think that's what you're saying with wrestling with like the hope of wanting things to be good, right? I completely agree with that analysis of this conversation and what I'm kind of struggling with. And also there is this wrestling with like the question I asked you earlier of what does it even mean to be Christian anymore? If people can be culturally Christian, if people can be this pastor in Louisiana or um all of the different ways that there are to practice Christianity, it's like, then what does it actually mean? Once something is so multiplicitous, is it just the water we're swimming in, or does it actually have any characteristics? And if so, like, which ones are the right ones and the wrong ones? Which ones are the accurate ones and the inaccurate ones? I did want to make sure too that you said that there was another article that you wanted to reference. I wanted to make sure we got to that.
yeah, yeah. So this one I actually think is honestly even worse to me than the witch one, which is pretty bad. But this one, so uh this was a pastor who has been commenting on this woman. His name is Stephen L. Anderson, and he's a pastor in Phoenix. And he put on Twitter, and I'm gonna have to look close to read this. Uh, and so this is Stephen L. Anderson at S. Anderson something I can't read, but he tweeted or X'd or whatever the hell it is now. I would be pissed if I donated to a church and found out that they were giving the Lord's money to quote single mother unquote whores. I would want it to go to the Lord's work or towards helping godly Christians who are in need. Churches should not be funding fornicators and their bastards. And then, that tweet is just bad enough. But then he goes on he's also on, I don't know, some social media, basically doubling down on this absolute horseshit. Which, uh, so yeah, I can see. But so what? I'm just gonna stop. What your reaction says it all to me. But what are your what what comes through your mind?
I'm on the verge of tears. That is one of the most disgusting things I have heard in a long time. And to have been raised in this religion too. And again, I want to reiterate, like, I do not believe in Christianity. I am an ex-evangelical, and there are still so many people that are fighting for love and light under the framework of Christianity, and or not just love and light, but like truth and wholeness under the framework of Christianity. And like that to me is just the antithesis of any truth, any love, any resonance that I ever felt when I was practicing, or when I would have conversations with good people who called themselves Christians. That is just patently false on any understanding of Christianity. And to say that it's using God's money for whores and bastards, I'm like, I'm sorry. What is God's money for? What money does God have a need for? It is easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. God does not give a fuck about your money, but I guarantee you he gives a fuck about starving babies. Like, I am just disgusted by that malignment of the beauty that can still be found, that hope that I think that there are people out there fighting for. And on top of that, it is people like this that is why the religion, frankly, needs to crumble. Like, and to say towards like God's holy people, I'm like, what did Jesus die on the cross for? To redeem us of our sins. But because this woman has a child and has had sex before, she is beyond saving. We should give up on her. Let her burn in hell. Nope. Jesus came to save every single one of us. But your righteous indignation is smarter than Jesus, is smarter than the God that you say you believe in. You don't believe in Jesus. You don't believe in God. You believe in your own insecurity that is driving your desire for power and control. That's what you believe in. You believe that you are so small and little that you need to say this disgusting bullshit about other human beings. That's the only God that you believe in. And I just I could keep going, but I think the message is clear when I think about that.
Yeah, no, I think your response says it all. And I don't know. No, not only did he tweet this absolute like reprehensible like junk, beyond junk, but then he when called out on it, put a video up, defending it even further, and of course tries to use scripture to justify things. So the first thing I actually, if I were to go to church again, which I mean, if I were to pick a church to go to, let's say, one of my first questions would be, who wrote the epistle, the pastoral epistles? Because if they say Paul, then I'm leaving, because there's so much evidence that Paul did not write the pastoral epistles. They were written far after Paul would have ever lived. And so to somehow say that Paul wrote those, specifically for those of you who don't know, talking about Timothy and Titus, and so if you're going to use the pastoral epistles, as a standalone and claim any, it's that drives me crazy. But so that's how this person, human being, tried to defend this with some verses in Timothy around widows, and making this very convoluted argument that shows his ignorance and shows. But what I find so funny is, right, all of the facts that, so when this lady called, as far as I can tell, like, she never stated anything about her marital status.
Nope.
She could have been, All she stated was, I have a kid who's hungry, not anything else. But yet look at what this was, look at all that was piled on top of her, that she was a whore. Yeah, a witch, but also a whore, because I guess both they apparently go together.
Mhm.
Uh Probably demonic too. I'm sure that's in there as well. Um, but I mean, we don't know that she was single. She may have, well, her husband could be dead. Her husband, you know, she why is the kid a bastard necessarily? We don't know that. She never said that. We don't even know that she's single. Like, we have no evidence. That the only fact we have is, I have a baby and they're hungry and I don't have food for them. That is literally, from what I can tell, I don't have a recording of, however, you know, uh, I want to know that she called this dude. I mean, there's no evidence that she did.
Right,
He's just
right.
opining. Like, he's just opening his word hole and pushing air out. Um, so just all the assumptions made. But I want to, you know, how can you use, one piece of scripture that doesn't even say what he said, by the way. I mean, it's talking about, like, oh, again, misunderstanding the context, misunderstanding the culture, misunderstanding the fact that it wasn't Paul who wrote this, but a raving misogynist, who hated women, wrote these, wrote these, and certainly not Paul. Uh, and in all of that, though, his hate, just assumes that this this woman, is a whore because she has a baby. We don't even know it's out of wedlock, but contrast that with the story of Jesus at the well in John. Which, again, I get, to be fair, was added after. It's not part of the original manuscript, and any Bible worth its salt will point that out, that this was not part of the original manuscript. So, again, but you can't use this other manuscript, this fake this thing fake to be by Paul.
Right.
But with the character of Jesus, everyone talks about the woman at the well, and so here's a woman who very clearly was stated that she had no uh that she had no husband, right? She was caught in well, actually, there's two stories. Actually, I'm kind of conflating them. You have the woman at the well in Samaria, and then you have the woman accused of adultery, caught of adultery where he's not throwing stones. So I'm actually conflating them. So twice, and actually, the woman in Samaria is not contested. That is generally considered to be is not considered to be added on. So this, Jesus didn't condemn a woman who said she had 5 husbands and was sleeping around. He just said, go and sin no more. He didn't condemn her, and same with the woman caught in adultery. He didn't condemn her. So I love how this pastor thinks he's better than Jesus, which he does.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just the bottom line there.
I am just floored by, I would want the Lord's money to go to the Lord's work. What's the Lord's work? What's the Lord's work, then? If it's not giving to hungry children, how would you describe the Lord's work? Like, genuine question. I'm like, just stunned and appalled. I cannot imagine the cognitive dissonance and the amount that this person must dislike themselves to be able to say this. And also, churches should not be funding fornicators. I don't know this man from Adam, but I'm like, do you have kids? Like, also, fornicators, it just also pulls on this whole, like, oh, but as soon as there's a ring on your finger, then a woman is saved by her husband, and sex is now fine. It's like, that's kind of a whole other issue, but just to call her a fornicator because there is a child present as though that's a bad thing is like, you don't know if she's married. You don't know that if she's in holy communion with a partner and that this child was given birth to in wedlock, and that would be okay under your worldview.
See, but this is how we end up getting dragged down into,
Mm-hmm.
because it feels good. Like, there's a part of us that feels good because we see the harm that this causes. But again, it's just good to notice it. I don't judge it.
It
Like,
is,
there's
yeah.
that, and putting. But I do want to just, the way I would counter it. So you made a very great point. Then what is the point? The Lord's money. Well, why don't we see what Jesus had to say about what he came for? Like, literally from the Bible, like from Luke, chapter 4. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring glad tidings to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord. Rolling up the scroll, he handed it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all in the synagogue looked intently upon him. He said to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Well, maybe that's what Jesus said he came. Dude, I don't think he'd hire you, Steve, buddy. I don't think you would be hired by Jesus.
I think even just the let the repressed and the captive go free. Like, that was just so striking to hear, especially in the context of where we are, again, in our current zeitgeist with, yes, the Epstein files, with, yes, the male loneliness epidemic, but with all of the ICE raids that we are seeing, with genocide happening across the world. Like, let the repressed and captive go free. How can we best create a society where we are upholding equal opportunity for everyone to be free? And those that are repressed and captive are not. And this tweet is so repressive, so repressive. And the archetype of the witch serves to break through repression. It is the Joan of Arc that was said that she was crazy because she was hearing voices, but was a warrior that broke out of all of that, right? It is these medicine women that were burned at the stake because they actually had knowledge about childbirth and midwifery. And it is all of these women that now are rediscovering the history of the witch. And there's actually a really beautiful book that's called The Witch that goes into the history of witchhood and what the definition of that is. And it is breaking free from repression. And because women, femme-presenting people, and minorities across the board have been repressed, the witch is the one that says, we don't need you to be who we are. We can be who we are, and we'll live off grid. Sure, call me the spooky, scary woman in the woods. My hair is going to grow long and free, and I'm going to run barefoot, and you have a really good time doing your Lord's work while we are setting the repressed and captive free.
Yeah, love it. Wow. I couldn't have said, it's amazing. You just let the words of Jesus speak, but I can't wait to see who will come at us for this. I'm very curious, because anytime you actually say what Jesus said, people get angry. But the good news
Isn't that
is
fascinating?
it's actually good, because it lets me know who you are. So I'm not surprised by anything that comes out of your mouth,
one piece that I do want to tie it back to, just, in the heart of Bow Down, the fact that so much of this is also such gendered language. And like you said, we don't know her relationship status. We don't know anything about that. And yet we see the language of whore and fornicator. And the Shreveport pastor calling her the witch, which we keep coming back to, of course. But also there was the language of I'm trying to find the other article now. I've lost it in my tabs. But all of this being about motherhood as well is not lost on me. And I think it's important that we touch on that as well. And I think you made such a powerful point earlier when you said these are largely the people that want to strip away women's agency when it comes to their bodily autonomy, often due to abortion, because in their worldview that is murder. But and I think your point of okay, then what about once the child is alive? They need food to survive. Is rolling back SNAP benefits not child murder if kids are starving because of it?
And these are
And
the same people who don't want free school lunches. Like, like they're adamantly opposed to free school lunches. But
and
again, the hypocrisy, yeah. And you're
yeah,
right, the motherhood is so devalued in a sense. Like if it's not the right kind of motherhood, and you want to
right.
avoid birth control. So you actively want to stop, you know, you basically just don't want women to have sex. Like, and you want them to pay for having sex. You want there to be a tax on women to have sex. But yet you wonder why women don't want to have sex with you. Like,
Well, and why the birth rates are the lowest that they've been in, like, maybe ever, I wanna say. There was some stat that has come out. I'll pull the actual data and link it down below. I don't wanna just blow smoke. But they're the birth rates have significantly dropped this year. And it's like, do you think the rolling back of Roe v. Wade has nothing to do with that? Then we're also upset that birth rates are dropping and that these women are struggling. But notice, like, I wonder what would happen if a father had called a church and said, "I have a starving baby." Like, what would there be a difference in the response? We don't know. But I think it is also interesting that these responsibilities of, you know, typically who was responsible for feeding the child? The mother, the woman, because and I think it's exactly what you said, like motherhood is so devalued, but it is also so prized. And it's because there is the right kind of motherhood. Exactly like you said. It has to be the right kind of motherhood, which is not on birth control, only having sex for reproduction, but still satisfying your husband and being the best mother ever who could never possibly need a handout, a formula, because you married correctly and no godly husband would have a job that wouldn't allow him to provide for his family. Of course, I'm creating all of these other external variables, but I think that this way of thinking is just so prevalent and is imbued into this story that it is, well, sure, maybe she was a fornicator and a whore. Maybe she was sexually assaulted and then forced to have this child, being told there's all of these things that will support you having the child, and now being turned away. Like, it really is so misogynistic too. It is. And it's also classist. There's so many other variables here, and I just love what you said about it not being the right kind of motherhood, because we've talked about in the past how, like, motherhood is such a thing that women are just judged on, and if you choose not to be a mother, like, there is still this sentiment that it's like, well, are you really a full woman? You haven't experienced the full spectrum of what it means to be a woman if you haven't, given birth, or raised children. And also, that's not where the judgment stops with motherhood. It's not just choosing to be a mom. It's also all of these contingencies that go into it and being the right kind of mother.
which is almost an impossible task anyway, right? Because we're we I'm convinced most of us can barely manage for ourselves, and yet to be in charge of another
Right.
human being. I listen. I'm
Well,
speaking for myself here.
yeah.
No shade. Like I having a kid. I have one kid. Having a kid practically broke me. And so yeah. I think being a mother is is an impossibly difficult task, frankly. And fathers don't often make it easier. And listen, I'll call myself out on this as well. I certainly would be a much better father now than I was, when I had my daughter. Uh, at least certainly in terms of like, uh, certainly in terms of an emotional presence and things like that. I know that for a fact. I mean, I think I was generally pretty, I reasonable about splitting chores. Like as a, I mean, I still think the woman's going to take the brunt of it no matter what. But I like to think I was not, definitely not unreasonable. Like I was in the top 20th percentile at least from a chore perspective, from a doing things perspective, I would argue. Certainly not in the top 10, but I'd say somewhere around 80. I'd say right on the 80th, so better than 4 out of 5 men, but probably worse than 1 out of 5 is if I was going to be honest. So we really went all over the place. I don't know what's going to make the cut and what isn't, but it's us, like it or hate it. And everything I said, I stand by. You know what? Like, it's not all lovely, it's not all perfect, but it's all me. And
Yeah.
if it
'Cause we
resonates
all
or if
have it
it
all within
doesn't,
us.
if it creates emotion, if what we've talked about today makes you angry or sad or happy or any of those things, good, because there's energy there. And you know what? Like, love us or hate us, at least there's energy. And we're energizing you, positive or negative. I'll take it. I'd rather have good press, but you know, like, these are real things. I'm curious what everyone else thinks. So uh
Yeah,
as always, Reese,
absolutely.
lovely to talk with you and
Yeah.
share these complex things.
100%. Totally agree. And yeah, let us know in the comments wherever you may be listening or watching, your thoughts, your reactions, your 2 cents. And if there's anything that you feel passionate about that you do want to talk to us about, like, please let us know. We want to be creating things that, like Dennis said, are energizing you and are creating um expansion in your life. So thank you, listeners, for being a part of that, for being here, for listening to us, and we will see you all next time. Bow Down is a weekly podcast from the Cohere Collective that explores esoteric and empowered feminism.
Please subscribe to Bow Down wherever you may be listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. And if there's anyone you think would enjoy this episode, or maybe just needs to hear it, please share it.
If you want to stay up to date on all things Bow Down, you can follow the Cohere Collective on any social media platform at the Cohere Collective, and check out other content and offerings at www.thecoherecollective.com.
If you're interested in working with Reese to find and pursue your purpose, I encourage you to head to www.thecoherecollective.com/life-coaching.
If you're interested in working with Dennis to shed your mask and embrace your desires, you can email Dennis at dennis@theheartstoybox.com.
Huge thank you to Jack Corbett for Bow Down's music. You can find him on Instagram at j.corbe. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
And as always, we hope you feel like you are living more coherently. And until next time, love.